Revelation. Who is Babylon the Great, the mother of prostitutes? Revelation Bible verses explain. We'll start with Revelation chapter 17 and 18. Come, I will show you the punishment of the great prostitute who sits by many waters. With her the kings of the earth committed adultery, and the inhabitants of the earth were intoxicated with the wine of her adulteries. There I saw a woman sitting on a scarlet beast that was covered with blasphemous names and had 7 heads and 10 horns. The woman was dressed in purple and scarlet and was glittering with gold, precious stones, and pearls. She held a golden cup in her hand, filled with the abominable things and the filth of her adulteries. The name written on her forehead was a mystery: Babylon the Great, the mother of prostitutes and of the abominations of the earth. I saw that the woman was drunk with the blood of God's holy people, the blood of those who bore testimony to Jesus. When I saw her, I was greatly astonished. Then the angel said to me, Why are you astonished? I will explain to you the mystery of the woman and of the beast she rides, which has the 7 heads and 10 horns. The waters you saw where the prostitute sits are peoples, multitudes, nations, and languages. The woman you saw is the great city that rules over the kings of the earth. The kings of the earth committed adultery with her, and the merchants of the earth grew rich from her excessive luxuries. I don't know about you, but the first time I read that, I was so confused. So you really have to kind of take a step back and look into how the Bible considers what the word prostitute is as a symbol. So as a symbol, not literally a prostitute. So one of the first things you should consider when you read, especially the Old Testament, is when the Old Testament refers to a city, a state, or a country, it's in the feminine form. So Jerusalem's considered a she, Israel's considered a she. And I think that's a little bit weird for us Americans because we consider American to be, shall we say, masculine. But for example, in Germany, they considered it their motherland. So kind of consider this more like a motherland. So the prostitute is their motherland, I guess is the best way to put it. Now let's get into where the prostitute part comes from. And you have to really look at Isaiah and Jeremiah to understand where this comes from. So let's first look at Isaiah chapter 1, verses 21 through 23. See how the faithful city Jerusalem has become a prostitute. She was once full of justice, righteousness used to dwell in her, but now murderers. Your silver has become dross, your choice wine is diluted with water, your rulers are rebels, partners with thieves, they all love bribes and chase after gifts. They do not defend the cause of the fatherless, the widow's case does not come before them. So you can see here in Isaiah, he's actually referring to the city of Jerusalem as a prostitute. And let's kind of backtrack and try to unpack that. So specifically, Israel had a covenant with God. God was their bridegroom and Israel was the bride. And Israel started to worship other gods like the god Baal, which had human sacrifice, as well as, you might recall, Solomon had wives that came from foreign lands. They brought their gods with them. And people were not just worshiping God, they were worshiping foreign gods. So in God's point of view, if Israel is the bride and God is the bridegroom, Israel is committing adultery with other gods. All right, so you see how the prostitute image is here. Again, Israel is a prostitute and is worshiping other gods, not God himself. So that is where the term prostitute comes from. It's like not worshiping God who you're supposed to. And apparently this sin is even more pronounced for Israel, which had that initial covenant with God, with Moses at the very beginning to worship only the God. Now, if you continue on with Jeremiah, you actually get Babylon in here. So Jeremiah chapter 51, verses 7 through 9. Babylon was a gold cup in the Lord's hand. She made the whole earth drunk. The nations drank her wine. Therefore, they have now gone mad. Babylon will suddenly fall and be broken. Wail over her. We would have healed Babylon, but she cannot be healed. Let us leave her and each go to our own land, for her judgment reaches to the skies. It rises as high as the heavens. So let's talk a little bit about Babylon here. So in Revelation, we do hear about the whore of Babylon, which is symbolic. Here we're actually referring to Babylon. So the Babylon, the Nebuchadnezzar. I'm certain most of you have heard about the Hanging Gardens of Babylon, which Nebuchadnezzar created, which had this Archimedes screw that would bring the water up to the top of this palace, and the Hanging Gardens would be there. It was one of the 7 wonders of the ancient world. Babylon was considered just an almighty nation that had conquered the world and was also considered a golden empire. So if we go to the book of Daniel and we go to the statue that Nebuchadnezzar dreamed, Babylon is considered the golden empire there. So that gold cup, the golden empire of Babylon, she made the whole earth drunk. The nations drank her wine. So the whole earth was drunk with her wealth, with her power, with her military might. And of course, Babylon was not worshiping the true God. So it was adulterous. It was a prostitute. Babylon, in this case, is a prostitute. And she is so evil, so bad, she cannot be healed. And she just needs to be judged and destroyed. And she was destroyed. Just as in the book of Revelation, Babylon the whore is also going to be destroyed. And the merchants of the earth are going to be very upset when Babylon is destroyed. So who is the whore of Babylon? If you kind of look at this, maybe you can kind of understand. Again, we're referring to actually either a nation state or a city. So the prostitute is a city or a nation that rejects God, hurts the vulnerable, rejects justice, and does evil things. So as you read Revelation chapter 17 and 18, you find that the woman is a city. She's a city with 7 hills. She's a city that rules over the world. The woman you saw is the great city that rules over the kings of the earth. It's a city that drinks the blood of saints. I saw that the woman was drunk with the blood of God's holy people, the blood of those who bore the testimony to Jesus. It's a city that made the kings of the world rich and has also caused them to renounce God. The kings of the earth committed adultery with her, and the merchants of the earth grew rich with her excessive luxuries. The city is also by many waters, peoples, nations, and languages. The waters you saw where the prostitute sits are peoples, multitudes, nation, and languages. So these are all clues as far as what is this. So again, when you first read it and you hear about the whore of Babylon, this prostitute, you think this is a woman, but no, it's either a city or a nation that has 7 hills, rules over the world, drinks the blood of saints, made the kings of the world rich, and caused them to renounce God. And it's by many waters, peoples, nations, and languages. So those are our clues. So let's kind of look at those clues and see who the contenders could be. So for me, the top contenders are Rome, Jerusalem, Mecca, and Washington, D.C. And by the way, Washington, D.C. was definitely something that threw me for a loop when I started researching this. But let's first start with Rome. Most people know that there's 7 hills in Rome. So we have the Palatine Hill, the Aventine Hill, the Capitoline Hill, Selaean Hill, Esquiline Hill, Viminal Hill, and the Quirinal Hill. So again, there are 7 hills in Rome, and most people are fairly aware of that. So did Rome rule the world? Certainly. Rome was the center of the Roman Empire from 625 BC to 476 AD. So for a very, very long time, it was the center of a worldwide empire. And then after the fall of Rome, it kind of became resuscitated as the center of the papacy and the Catholic Church, which did rule most of Europe and part of the Middle East from 310 AD to the present. So did Rome kill the saints? Did they drink the blood of Jesus's holy people? Yeah, there were many saints killed in Rome. St. Paul and St. Peter are the most notable ones. St. Paul, who was a Roman citizen, was supposedly killed by the sword in Rome. So since he was a Roman citizen, he was allowed death by the sword, which was quicker than what happened to St. Peter. St. Peter supposedly was hung upside down on a cross. He refused to be hung on the cross as Jesus would and asked to be hung upside down. So both St. Peter and St. Paul were killed apparently in the same area where we now have the Vatican and St. Peter's Basilica. So supposedly that is where they were killed. And that location is where Emperor Nero's palace was. Emperor Nero is also very famous for killing in the 1st century AD many, many Christians, some of which he just burned alive. He did some pretty nasty things there. So in July of 64 AD, Rome was devastated by a fire. Most people blamed Nero, and Nero didn't want to be blamed, so Emperor Nero blamed the Christians and said, they're the ones who did it, not me. So what he did, and here's a quote from the historian Tacitus, they were covered with the skins of beasts, they were torn by dogs and perished, or were nailed to crosses, or were doomed to the flames and burnt to serve as a nightly illumination when the daylight had expired. So they were treated very, very badly. And again, Peter and Paul were probably among these victims. Now, did Rome cause people to forsake God? I certainly think that Emperor Nero and the persecution of 1st century Christians would cause people to forsake God. But I think the biggest problem with Rome and forsaking God is once the papacy was established. So even though the papacy was supposed to be established for people to worship God, it unfortunately in many times did the exact opposite. So, for example, in 1378, there was a schism. We had 3 different popes. They all excommunicated each other. So The original popes or the papacy, they were more military rulers than religious figures. And then we had some kind of crazy popes here. So we have Pope Leo X. He was called the party pope. So look that up, Pope Leo X, the party pope. And he specifically said, since God has given us the papacy, let us enjoy it. And he was very used to luxuries before he became the pope. Again, he was set up to become a ruler rather than a pope per se. He had a very luxurious lifestyle where he bankrupted the papacy. And because he bankrupted the papacy, he had to come up with ways to earn money. And one of the ways Pope Leo X earned money for the papacy was to buy and sell indulgences. So I don't know if you know what that is. You should definitely look that up. I'll just give you a quick little run through what it is. If you donate money to the church, you can say, these are my sins, and the church will forgive your sins if you give them some money. And I hate to say it, but I hear stuff even today, some of these televangelists saying, send me money and all these wonderful things happen to you. But back then, the Pope actually said, you'll be forgiven of your sins if you pay us some money. And that was called an indulgence. And that is why Martin Luther decided to put his, I think it was 94 Theses, that he put on the door of the church to say, hey, this is wrong. You know, you can't say money is going to forgive sins. Only Jesus and Jesus's blood can forgive sins, not a piece of paper, not an indulgence, not money. That is not how you forgive sins. So there's a great schism in the church after Pope Leo X. Now, not to be outdone by Pope Leo X, who did the indulgences and was the party pope, Pope Alexander VI. Okay, Pope Alexander VI had 3 different mistresses, 14 bastard children, and he threw orgies in the papal palace. I'm unfortunately going to be quoting this from October 30th, 1501, from Johann Bouchard, and this is apparently something he wrote in his diary. After the banquet had been cleared away, the city's 50 most beautiful whores danced with guests, first clothed, then naked. The dancing over, the ballet began, and the Pope and 2 of his children in the best seat. Candelabra was set up on the floor, scattered among them were chestnuts, which the courtesans had to pick up, crawling between the candles. Then the serious sex started. Guests stripped and ran onto the floor where they mounted or were mounted by the prostitutes. The coupling took place in front of everyone present. Service kept score of each man's orgasms, for the Pope greatly admired virility and measured a man's machismo by his ejaculative capacity. That was a pope. Pope Alexander VI did that in the papal palace in the Vatican. That's what was going on. So just crazy stuff. So I do think you can definitely say there's a history of people forsaking God with the papacy, with the popes in the Vatican. And then, unfortunately, even more recently, we have a 20th and 21st century sexual abuse cases where priests in the Catholic Church are accused of being pedophiles, of sexually raping and abusing children. And then the Catholic Church, of course, tried to squash that. And I do believe the current Catholic Church is being more open about it and trying to actually stop it. But for a long time, it was covered up and definitely forsaking God, definitely sinful. So there's a lot of sin in that papacy. All right, did Rome make the kings of the world rich? So Rome in the ancient times was the main ancient trading hub of the Mediterranean Sea and was also one of the original banking hubs. So yes, Rome definitely made the kings of the ancient world very rich. And is Rome a city by many waters? Yes. It's next to the Tiberian Sea, the Mediterranean Sea, and within Rome you have the Tiber and Rubicon rivers. And in ancient times, the Roman Empire ruled over many different people, many different nations, many different languages. Certainly most of you who read the New Testament know that the Roman Empire was in charge when Jesus was crucified. And of course, Rome's in Italy, and Israel, again, is quite far away, but is still under the Roman Empire. The Roman Empire also stretched to quite a bit of England, Germany, Spain, France, and the northern part of Africa. So again, Rome really did rule a large area. So if we look at little check boxes here, does Rome have 7 hills? Yes. Is it a city that ruled over the world? Yes. City that drinks the blood of saints, God's holy people? Yes. St. Peter, St. Paul especially. A city made the kings of the world rich and caused them to renounce God? Yeah, unfortunately, the papacy. Is it a city by many waters, peoples, nations, and languages? Yes. Okay, so again, most people actually do believe that Rome is the whore of Babylon. But I have a few more contenders for you. The next contender is Jerusalem. And I do want to mention, just because, let's say, Rome is the whore of Babylon, that doesn't mean that Jerusalem can also not be the whore of Babylon or Mecca or Washington, D.C. More than one thing can be true at once. And that is one of the things I think you see in Revelation chapter 17. It says the beast has 7 heads, which are 7 hills, which are 7 kings. It says it stands for more than one thing. So this could be, again, more than one city involved here. So, if you didn't know, there are 7 hills of Jerusalem. I didn't know there were 7 hills of Jerusalem until I actually took a tour there, and my tour guide actually just mentioned off the cuff, and 7 heads of Jerusalem. I went, what? There's 7 hills in Jerusalem, just like Rome? And he said, yes. So in Jerusalem, you have Mount Scopus, the Mount of Olives, the Mount of Corruption, Mount Ophel, the original Mount Zion, the new Mount Zion, and the hill of the Antonia fortress. So there are 7 hills in Jerusalem. So did Jerusalem rule the world? This is where you have to kind of think maybe, maybe not. So certainly when we had King David and King Solomon, they did conquer the area and they were a ruler in that area at that time. But I don't think you could ever say Jerusalem ruled the world. You can claim that since 3 of the world's major religions are centered in Jerusalem, Judaism, Christianity, and Islam, even Islam considers Jerusalem the second holiest place, Mecca being the holiest, they consider Jerusalem the second holiest place. So Jerusalem, you can say, rules the world religiously, but I wouldn't say militarily. Certainly not anymore. Did Jerusalem kill the saints? Oh boy, yes. Well, first, Jesus Christ, our Lord and Savior, was crucified in Jerusalem. I think we all know that. What I actually didn't quite know, and I had to research this a little bit, is ancient prophets were killed there. So the prophet Zechariah was killed in the temple courtyard. Isaiah was sawn in two by the king of Judea. Jeremiah supposedly was stoned to death in Jerusalem. And then in the New Testament, St. Stephen was also stoned to death in Jerusalem. So many saints were killed, many prophets were killed, and of course, Jesus was crucified there in Jerusalem. So lots and lots of sins. So again, did Jerusalem cause people to forsake God? Yes. In killing Jesus Christ, in killing the Old Testament prophets, certainly Jerusalem caused people to forsake God. Did Jerusalem make the kings of the world rich? Well, during King Solomon's reign, yes, he did make the other kings and queens of the world rich. He founded many colonies, trading posts, military outposts, and expeditions to Phoenicia, Tarshish, and Ophir to trade luxury products like gold, silver, and pearls. He had so many colonies that he collected tribute, and he collected famously 666, notice the number, talents of gold per year. And then he also exchanged luxury gifts with the Queen of Sheba, even rumored to be the Ark of the Covenant that he traded with her. So you could say that Solomon maybe made the kings of the world rich, but again, I wouldn't say today. Is Jerusalem a city by many waters? Yes, Jerusalem's between the Mediterranean Sea, the Dead Sea, and also the Jordan River. Ancient Israel was a seat of power surrounded by many different and hostile nations around it. There were many nations around Israel back then. So Jerusalem isn't as strong a contender, I think, as Rome, but it does have some of these characteristics. So number one, does it have 7 hills? Yes. Is it a city that rules over the world? Well, I would say perhaps with religion, it rules over the world with the 3 major religions centered in Jerusalem. So compares. City that drinks the blood of saints, God's holy people. Oh yes, 2 checks for that one. City that made the kings of the world rich and caused them to renounce God. Also another, maybe. They certainly have corruption in the past and today, and definitely have a check. It's a city by many waters, peoples, nation, and languages. I do want to mention when I visited Israel, one of the things that I didn't know until I visited it is they have many immigrants from many different nations. So there was immigrants from Ethiopia there, immigrants from Russia, from Eastern Europe, from other nations in Africa. So I had this certain picture of Israel, and I never really considered Israel to be a land of immigrants, but it is. And when these immigrant comes in, they have these foreign languages, and they take these immigrants and teach them within, I think it's like a 7-week period, how to speak Hebrew, and then give them a trade job within that time period and assign a job to them. So they do integrate and have many different immigrants, many different peoples and languages within Israel even today. Okay, so let's move to the next candidate here, Mecca. I was surprised after finding out. I already knew Rome had 7 hills, and then I found out Jerusalem had 7 hills. So I thought, let's check out this Mecca of 7 hills. Yes. So the 3 major religious cities, Rome, Jerusalem, and Mecca, all have 7 hills. And I found, especially with God, coincidences, well, they're planned. They're not happenstance. They're usually planned. So here are the 7 hills of Mecca. We had the Jabal War Mountain, Jabal al-Nur, Jabal Omar, the Thabur Mountain, Jabal Kandama Mountain, Abu Qubays Mountain, and the Quichan Mountain. So those are the 7 hills of Mecca. Again, they also have 7 hills. All right, did Mecca rule the world? Mecca is the center of Islam. And if you want to be considered a good Muslim, you are required to go to Mecca one time during your lifetime. Mecca is ruled by Saudi Arabia's kings and princes who have vast oil wealth, and their oil wealth has been ruling the world, I'd say, since the 1970s. So again, that vast oil wealth is ruling the world through oil. Saudi Arabia also controls Mecca, which controls like the Muslim holy capital. And they are considered, the Sauds are considered the gatekeepers of their faith, but even within Saudi Arabia, the rulers are seen as corrupt, who are not really religious, who are more hypocrites, and who have ungodly amounts of wealth. So even in Saudi Arabia, they're not considered good rulers, they're considered more corrupt, worldly rulers. Now, let's get back to the Bible. Let's get back to Genesis and Abraham, Ishmael, and Isaac. So according to the Islamic faith, Abraham and Ishmael established Mecca and the Kaaba there. So if we go to Genesis chapter 17, verses 18 through 21, then Abraham said to God, I hope Ishmael will live and serve you. God said, no, I say your wife Sarah will have a son. You will name him Isaac. I will make my agreement with him, and that will continue forever with all his descendants. You mentioned Ishmael, and I have heard you. I will bless him, and he will have many children. He'll be the father of 12 great leaders. His family will become a great nation. But I'll make my agreement with Isaac, the son who Sarah will have. He'll be born at the same time next year. So Abraham's first son was Ishmael, which was born to the handmaiden of Sarah. And Ishmael and the handmaiden were sent off into the desert. And supposedly, Ishmael established the Kaaba in Mecca. Apparently, according to the Islamic faith, Abraham actually showed up as well and helped establish Mecca. Whether or not that happened, we don't know. But again, in the Bible, Ishmael is sent off, and specifically, Ishmael is supposed to be the center of the Islamic faith. What are the sins of Mecca? The House of Saud, the ruling family, controls Mecca, and you should look up and see what Mohammed bin Zayed has done. He's done many awful, atrocious things, including dismembering a journalist. But they also control the Mecca Hajj. A lot of pilgrims show up for their Hajj, their pilgrimage. In 2015, 2,400 pilgrims were killed in a deadly stampede. In 2024, 1,300 pilgrims died due to the extreme heat. They've also destroyed the nearby city around Mecca to make way for more high-end hotels and shops. And the Saudi Arabia family is considered very lavish, very corrupt, and very worldly, and not very religious. Of course, hypocritically religious. So did Mecca kill the saints? So if you consider the pilgrims who have been killed at Mecca, you can say that saints were killed. According to Islamic tradition, and I might be saying this wrong, Amir ibn Yasar, an early Islamic convert, was tortured to death with his family in Mecca. So we can say, yes, according to Islam, they've killed saints there. Have they caused people to forsake God? I guess depends who you talk to. In 1979, people seized the mosque, and the militants said the ruling Saud dynasty had lost its legitimacy because it's corrupt, ostentatious, and destroyed Saud's culture by aggressive policy of westernization. In 2015, Iran's Khamenei has accused the Saudi royalty of being Satans, have reduced the Hajj to a religious tourist trip, and have hidden their enmity and malevolence toward the faithful. Did Mecca make the kings of the world rich? Well, in controlling the oil resources of the world and being a member, one of the biggest members of OPEC, yes, Saudi Arabia has made the kings of the world rich. Between 1975 and 2024, Saudi Arabia has given over $131 billion for assistance to other nations. In 2020, the Saudi Crown Prince, Mohammed bin Salman, gave $2 billion to Jared Kushner. Just gave it out of the goodness of his own heart. The money is thought to have gone to Trump. Is Mecca a city by many waters? Yes. It's next to the Red Sea, the Arabian Sea, the Persian Gulf, and there's also a wadi, the Wadi Ibrahim. A wadi in the Middle East is a place where water will run during the wet months and then dry out during the dry months. That's a wadi. So there's a wadi near Mecca. Muslims from all over the world will go and meet at Mecca. So whether you're a Muslim, let's say from Europe or from the Middle East or from India or from the United States, people from all over the world will converge on Mecca. So many different languages, tribes, and nations will meet there. So does it meet the characteristics? Does it have 7 hills? Yes. It's a city that rules over the world with its oil wealth? Yes. A city that drinks the blood of saints? If you consider the Hajj pilgrims and some of the early martyrs in Islam, then yes. The city that made the kings of the world rich and caused them to renounce God? Oh, yeah. City by many waters, peoples, nations, and languages. Yes, especially at every Hajj. So my last contender here is Washington, D.C. And I was surprised to find out, I found this out only rather recently, that Washington, D.C. has 7 hills. Now, most Americans know of Capitol Hill. You know about that one, but you might not have known about the others. So it's 7 hills here. We have Capitol Hill, Meridian Hill, Laurel Hills, Forest Hills, Hillbrook, Hillcrest, and Knox Hill. So there are 7 hills in Washington, D.C. So does Washington, D.C. rule the world? Yeah. So Washington, D.C. is considered the leader of the free world, at least until recently. It was considered the premier world power. The most powerful military in the world is supposedly the United States. And we have 750 U.S. military bases over the entire world, including bases in Europe, Japan, South Korea, and the Middle East. Now, the one that's a little more shaky is, did Washington, D.C. kill the saints? So the only thing I can really find, per se, is the U.S. Catholic Church and the sexual abuse of children, but it didn't actually happen in Washington, D.C. It happened in Boston, Chicago, California, Hawaii, Florida, Philadelphia, Portland, Ohio, but it didn't really happen in Washington, D.C. per se. Maybe there is one and I don't know about that. So I definitely like to hear your comments. Do you think Washington, D.C. killed any saints, or in any maybe metaphorical way has killed saints? I'd be curious to hear your comments on that. Did Washington, D.C. cause people to forsake God? We have current and past U.S. presidents who have committed adultery, and I think this is something you can say, I can say my entire life. So it's not just the current Trump administration, but my entire life, politicians in Washington, D.C. had this reputation of being considered liars and cheats. And I'd say more recently, these politicians are considered people who pander to a religious base, but who are hypocrites, who will say one thing, say they worship God, say they're good Christians, and do something totally different. So I would say yes, the politicians in Washington, D.C. have caused people to forsake God. And I'll go over this in a little more detail in a second here. So when we go back to Isaiah and Jerusalem as a prophet, it says, your rulers are rebels, partners with thieves. They all love bribes. They chase after gifts. They do not defend the cause of the fatherless. The widow's case does not come before them. So does this apply to Washington, D.C.? Let's kind of look at this. And I want to also give you 2 more quotes before we continue. God makes sure that orphans and widows are treated fairly. He loves the foreigners who live with our people and gives them food and clothes. So then, show love to those foreigners because you were once foreigners in Egypt. Administer true justice, show mercy and compassion to one another. Do not oppress the widow or the fatherless, the foreigner or the poor. All right, so first we're going to go with rulers who are rebels partnering with thieves who love bribes and chase after gifts. So in the first Trump administration, Trump's businesses apparently received $7.8 million in foreign payments while he was in office. In his current office, there is currently what they consider a Ponzi scheme, according to analysts, where there's a Trump meme coin that has no value, but you can put money into it. And it is considered a bribery scheme where anyone could put money towards this meme coin and legally get money to Trump, and he can use that. All right, so let's talk about Trump's border policy. So I'm not going to talk about the border as much as what he's doing to families. So he's tearing apart families and he's making children into orphans. He's separating the parents from the children, making them orphans. And that is against everything that I just read. The fatherless are to be protected. The vulnerable are to be protected. You are not to do these things. You're not supposed to be separating families like this. Recently, the Trump administration deported a 19-year-old teen with no criminal record to El Salvador, even though he had no criminal history in a 19-year-old. So again, this is not justice, and you are called to do justice, to show mercy, to show compassion if you're a Christian. Next thing, another current article, the Trump administration launches a new effort to deport unaccompanied migrant children, according to the internal memo. So what is an unaccompanied migrant children? That's an orphan. He wants to deport orphans. And specifically, again, I just read that, you are supposed to protect the fatherless. You're supposed to protect the orphans. As far as the widow, I did look up one article. This is an old article from the last administration where Trump bickered with the soldier's widow over a condolence call. Bickered with her, apparently, when her husband had died. So did Washington, D.C. make the kings of the world rich? I would say yes. The U.S. heads the G7 and G20 groups. Definitely look those up, which has profited the capitalistic nations in those groups. The U.S. is a primary member, at least was the primary member of the World Trade Organization. We'll see what happens with that. The U.S. is also the top nation for the world's billionaires. And the global economic trade has relied on, and this is, I'm sure you've heard of this, the almighty dollar since World War II. And again, it's called the almighty dollar. Yeah, we have made the kings of the world rich. Is Washington, D.C. a city by many waters? Yes. It is next to the Atlantic Ocean, the Potomac River, Anacostia River, Patuxent River, and the Eastern Bay. People from all the world gather at Washington, D.C. So again, people from all sorts of nations will gather there at the embassies in Washington, D.C. And at least until recently, we were considered the leader of the free world. So, does it meet all the characteristics? Does it have 7 hills? Yes. A city that rules over the world, with U.S. military bases all over the world, the almighty dollar and the military might. Yes, we rule over the world. A city that drinks the blood of saints, God's holy people. I'd say, no, not really, unless you consider the Catholic Church sexual abuse cases. But again, that didn't happen in Washington, D.C. So again, I'd be very curious if anyone else wants to comment on that. The city that made the kings of the world rich and caused them to renounce God? Yeah, I'd say so. City of many waters, peoples, nations, and languages? Yes. So 4 out of 5, but I don't know if you'd say it's a city that drinks the blood of saints. So please let me know what you think about the 4 possibilities of who the whore of Babylon actually is. Is it Rome? Is it Jerusalem? Is it Mecca? Is it Washington, D.C.? Is it all of them? Is it just some of them? And I definitely want your comments about Washington, D.C. and whether or not the blood of saints have been spilled at Washington, D.C., or perhaps it could refer to all of America's military might. Let me know in your comments what you think about that. Did I miss anything? Is there anything you think I should add? And I definitely recommend that you read Isaiah, Jeremiah, and Revelation, specifically chapters 17 and 18, to review what I've gone over here. Definitely read those books of the Bible so you can understand what's going on with, again, the prostitute of Babylon. In my next video, I'll be going over the 7 kings, which are also mentioned in Revelation chapter 17 and 18. I just didn't have enough time to go over the 7 kings, as well as who is the whore of Babylon or the prostitute of Babylon. In my next video, I'll be going over the 7 kings. It should come out a little bit quicker than this last one. Sorry for the delays. Did 2 videos together, and I'm separating them out, so the next one should come out fairly soon. All right, until then, God bless and keep praying. Thank you.